Ooh, that looks tasty. So this is the point where usually there would be some kind of silly, sometimes funny, usually just dumb, voiceover introduction. However, seeing as this game is based on real events in history, I didn't want to trivialize it, so please enjoy the preview. Welcome folks, Today the Hungry Gamer is back with another game review, and today we are talking about Holmes Murder Castle, designed by Seth Cooper and Brant Hoffman, with art by Holly Carden of Carden Illustration, and published by Blueprint Gaming Concepts. And I do apologize if I mispronounced any of those names. And before I get going, please make sure you turn on your Klingon subtitles, because if I make any errors in the rules overview, that's where you'll find those corrections. And so what this game is it is a multiplayer game in which you are kind of playing against the board. The board is playing as Holmes, and Holmes is kind of bouncing around through the different rooms, through secret passages that you don't have access to, and basically will be attacking you as you go, as you are trying to collect all this evidence to convict him. The interesting thing about it is that each player will be controlling Holmes on their turn with the use of a deck of cards saying what rooms he may or may not pop up in. If you are not interested in how this game is played, so we'll jump to my final thoughts, do you want to go to the timestamp on the screen right now? For those of us still here, let's talk about how this game is played. So the core of the game is relatively simple. I know I say that a lot, but most games, when you really break it down, are simple. So what's going to happen is each player will be one of these different investigators here. And each investigator has a player power that they're able to use, and they're all different. And in addition to that, each player will have a certain amount of starting evidence that they have already collected before they came into this murder castle. And what you'll be trying to do is you are trying to fill up all of these evidence tracks before Holmes has hit you that many times. And you'll see this is the aftermath of the very last game that I played with solo. You'll see I did actually win, and I was not super close to dying, but I was certainly there. It certainly could have happened. Now it's one of every time Holmes hits you, and you'll see how that happens in just a moment. You put one of the cubes here, and every time you get hit, you actually have to drop some of your evidence. So not only is it closer to death, you actually are given a little bit of a setback as well. And what's going to happen is, on your turn, a player will pick one of these different tiles. And it tells you right there on the tile what they do. Move 2 rooms, or move 1 room, explore the castle, which means you add another room. But then every other player around the table will get to follow and do that action as well. But the player that picked it will be able to do this bottom bonus action. And you can just go around the table, and you're moving around, you're adding new rooms, you're moving into rooms. And the key thing to note here is, as you add new rooms, I'm going to place a room right here. I'll move this little lock out of the way. Is you'll see that there's this safe that has a 3 on it. That means there's going to be 3 pieces of evidence in that room. And to pick that, the player who placed it gets to go to this little Ferris wheel over here. And they get to look in the bottom, and they get to pick the evidence from the bottom section and place it here. And again, if you remember, you're trying to fill up these different colored tracks here. So you might want to put the evidence that you particularly need. So you'll grab the evidence that you like, and you'll place it out. Now, eventually, these things will empty out. And when they empty out, the whole thing rotates around, and there is new evidence there that will be available, and these will fill back up as you go. Or if you're playing the solo mode, once everything is gone, then they will fill back up. We actually are almost done talking about this game, because the only other thing that you need to know is how Holmes is going to move. And Holmes moves fairly simply. The player whose turn it is will get to draw. And it tells you very clearly that Holmes is going to either move to room 9 or room 13. And you are going to have your choice as the person who drew the card of where they're going to go. So obviously you want to send Holmes close to your opponent so he will strike them. And if Holmes moves into the room with the player, they get struck, they get a cube, they drop some stuff, and on you go. Now, there's a couple other things that can happen. For example, you can pull one of these Holmes goes on a rampage, which means he's going to run and pop out of rooms all over the place, and you're going to be flipping one card, and then another card. Oh, look, he went on a rampage again. Yes, they do stack up, so then it'd be 3 more cards, and you get the idea. And again, the player who drew it's going to be picking where they go and just wailing on the other players in the group. And the only other thing worth pointing out is one of the actions you can take is you can draw event cards. And these event cards, it tells you right there on there what they do, Sometimes it'll be things that affect you right away, like these play nows. Sometimes it'll be something that you can hold on to for later, or it might be something that will affect how you can move around the castle. But all in all, you get the idea. What I will say is, briefly, because I spent most of my time playing the solo mode, what's going to happen in the solo game is you'll get to take 2 actions each turn, then after that, Holmes will move, and then he will also draw one of these little cards here, and that will see him destroying some evidence, meaning it simply gets picked up off the board according to the various colors that you pull on the cards here. Might be getting removed. He might be moving more, just walking through more rooms, trying to get closer and closer to you, or sometimes he is putting fake evidence out there, which are these black cubes that go into the bag, and then when they wind up on the Ferris wheel here, as you can see, there's one right there, and there's a couple down here. It means when you're placing out rooms, you're going to have to put rooms out that have nothing useful in them. And I'll also say there's also a way that you can play as Holmes, but I'm not going to dive into all of that. As I already mentioned, you're going to play through until somebody fills up their evidence, or I suppose until everybody's dead. And that's it. That's how this game works. So what do I like about this game? First of all, I'll say the production on this game is pretty darn good. And now I was using these standees laying flat down because it's easier to see, but I will say there are also miniatures. Always a little bit hard to see when you're looking at it unpainted or anything, but I will say that they are pretty good quality miniatures, and they certainly would look good painted. Cards are nice quality. I like the way the castle looks. The art is pretty good. All around, it's not something that you will be disappointed with as far as quality goes. I also like the building out of the very Betrayal House on the Hill or Betrayal at Baldur's Gate style, where you're going through and you're exploring, you're putting these tiles out, so you never know exactly what the place is going to look like, and it's going to be different every single game. I like that. But I think the cleverest little thing is this little Ferris wheel thing here. When I read about how it worked in the rulebook, I was like, well, that's kind of silly. But in practice, it's actually very clever because you know what it is that you need and you can see how far away the colors that you need are. So you can see that before, when I was right here, if I needed orange, that means I would have to put 1, 2, 3, I would have to get all 5 of these out before the thing would rotate and I could get to all these orange, and it adds a lovely little aspect to the game. And especially if you're playing in the multiplayer game, because there's tiles like this where if you pick this, you get to rotate the wheel, and now you have access to the things that you might want. I like it. It is very, very clever. I also appreciate how Holmes moves. There is something deeply dark and frightening about how he just bounces around the board, pops out all over the place, especially when you draw those rampage cards, and literally, sometimes he's going to move here, 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 and there's no rhyme or reason to where he's going to go, and that is exciting. It adds a nice tension to the game whenever Holmes moves. And the last thing that I appreciate is I appreciate the asymmetric nature of the different characters. It's not huge. They all have a different power, and every game you're going to start with different evidence, which makes it a little bit interesting as well as to what you're trying to find. So everyone's not trying to get the same color evidence. Everyone's looking for something different, which again keeps the game interesting. And I also like how every time you get hit, not only are you closer to being dead, but you're going to drop stuff. And I really like that setback. It adds to the theme of this horror, this fear. He shows up, he hits you, and you're like, ah, and you're running and you're dropping stuff. And that's, again, I think that works quite well. And finally, I think the solo mode, it works. It definitely works. I'm going to talk about it again in just a minute, but the solo mode works. It makes for an interesting, quick, and somewhat tense puzzle. It's different. You don't get to use the asymmetric player powers. A lot of the event cards get pulled out, and it's definitely not the same experience, but you can play it, and it does have some interesting stuff going on. So what are my quibbles with the game? And my first quibble is with the solo mode. As I said, I enjoyed playing the solo mode. It's clever, it's an interesting puzzle, but it is not as interesting as the game with a larger player count. And again, as I said at the beginning, I have not played this game at max player count or anything close to max player count, which I believe is 7. But when you have a bunch of different people drawing these tiles and you get to start following their actions and you're picking the tile that you really want because you want that bonus, then other people get to follow. Suddenly the game and the board is going to become a lot more dynamic than it is in the solo game. And that I think is where this game will be at its best, which again is not what I spent most of my time doing. My other quibble with the game is one that may not bother you at all, or it may be something that really you don't like. And a little bit this is my fault. I did not realize that H. Holmes was a real person. And this is a real event that happened that you are playing. And yes, the good guys are the investigators, but that might not be something that you want to gamify. You might not want to play a game that is about a real murderer. And that is perfectly understandable. And if you know me, you know that in general, historical games that are based on real events, I tend to shy away from because they make me feel a little bit weird. And so it might bother you. And as I said, it might not bother you at all. It might make no difference to you. You might find it interesting to kind of explore this world and dive into the history and learn about this monster. And so that's just something that for you to decide. And the only other quibble that I'll toss out, but really, folks, that's it. I think that this is just an interesting game. It takes some of those elements of betrayal at the house on the hill or betrayal at Baldur's Gate with the building of the castle out, which is very, very clever. It has some mechanics that I really enjoy. I really like the bit with the little Ferris wheel and putting out your evidence and finding the evidence. I think the way Holmes pops out, I think all of that is interesting. It does make for a tense game. And so if you are looking for something like that, and especially if you can get a high player count, then this is absolutely a game for you to check out. I think the solo mode is a bonus. If you're going to be able to play the game with multiple players and then you also enjoy solo, then it is also something worth checking out, assuming that the real history behind it does not bother you. So there you have it, folks. If I made any mistakes in the rules overview, please let me know in the comments with the timestamp. I'll get that into the Klingon subtitles. As always, if you found this video useful, please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.